Good afternoon and welcome to the BCTF webinar on radon in schools, what students, parents, and teachers need to know. I'm pleased to introduce our panel today. Anne-Marie Nicole, who is a researcher at Carex and a professor at Simon Fraser University. Michael Wisla, who is a health and safety officer here at the BC Teachers Federation. Fred Knock, a teacher from the Kootenai-Columbia School District. And unfortunately, Winnie Chang from Health Canada will be unable to join us today, but in her place, we have Men Biatang, who is program manager with the BC Lung Association. So I'll turn it over to Anne-Marie to begin our webinar.
Thank you, Mike. My presentation today is going to go over what radon is and why we believe it's important to test for radon in schools. And I'm joined here today with Alison Palmer, who's the Managing Director of Carex Canada as well, who will be fielding questions later on. So we're going to provide you some background just about the research project that led us here today, explain what radon is and why it's a problem in schools and why testing may be important, and discuss a study that we just conducted around school testing across the country and the implications of this research. So Carex Canada is a carcinogen surveillance system that's based at Simon Fraser University. It was originally funded as a pilot project by WorkSafe BC and fully funded by the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer in 2008. And we had our mandate renewed in 2012. And we are a research project that looks to estimate the number of Canadians that are exposed to carcinogens both at work and at home. We have a website that is publicly accessible that provides a lot of information about the different carcinogens that we look at, and we help people understand with different tools how their exposures can be characterized both at work and at home. And what's been interesting about radon is it turned out to be, out of all the different chemicals that we looked at, the most significant environmental exposure for Canadians in terms of developing lung cancer. So radon became our top priority for knowledge translation, in part because many Canadians are still unaware of radon and its implications for health. Radon exposure is a concern both at home and at work, and for children at school or in daycares and places where they spend significant amounts of time. So we joined with the BCTF. We presented at their Health and Safety Committee starting in 2014 to talk more about radon and understand a bit more what the BCTF had already been doing on this area and what their interests were for the future. At that time, the BCTF leadership made a recommendation to the BC Ministry of Education for mandatory school testing across the province. And this relationship has sparked our research into school testing across the country. We've asked a bigger question of what's been done in Canada up until this point in time around school testing and protocols for school testing. So we've been working together with the BCTF, and we're very happy to be here today at the accumulation of our working relationship to talk to you a bit more about radon in schools and why it's important across the country. So we have a quick poll question for people today in the audience. Are you familiar with the health effects of radon gas? Yes or no? And there should be a tool for you. The poll is now open. And please go ahead and answer the question. I'll give you a minute or two. Okay, I'm getting the go-ahead sign. So first of all, what is radon gas? And if you weren't familiar with radon gas, you're not alone. Less than 50% of Canadians can accurately describe what radon gas is. It's the natural decay product of uranium that's found in rocks and soil. And uranium is present across the country. It does have higher concentrations in some regions. But as uranium breaks down over time, it releases radiation. And radon gas is the point in that decay chain where it becomes a gas. And therefore it becomes much more mobile. And radon itself also disintegrates and releases radiation as it breaks down into both particles and radioactive substances. So for every atom of radon, 4 alpha particles are emitted. And on this screen, you can see the uranium decay chain. And these are the alpha particles that are emitted. Now, alpha particles are serious in that they are a particularly powerful form of radiation. And as radon breaks down, it releases 4 alpha particles. So the radiation is powerful, but only over a very short distance. And what this means is that as radon enters the lung, if it emits radiation, or if its progeny, as it breaks down, it also emits the progeny or emit radiation. This radiation can actually damage the DNA in the lining of the lung. And radon is often described as a cannon, essentially, that goes through DNA and does powerful damage to cells. And this type of clustered damage is actually more difficult for the body to repair. And over time, the increase in DNA damage can lead to genetic errors and mutations and eventually lead to the development of cancer. Health Canada recently stated that every year approximately 3,300 Canadians die of lung cancer related to radon exposure, which is significant and makes it the second leading cause of lung cancer in Canada for smokers and the first leading cause for non-smokers. This summer, Public Health Ontario released a study where they suggest that 1,000 to 1,500 new cancer cases per year are diagnosed in Ontario as a result of radon exposure. The US EPA has also tried to characterize the burden of environmental cancer due to radon gas, and they suggest that more people die from radon-related lung cancer than die from car accidents or drunk driving accidents. So how are people exposed to radon gas? It's a soil gas, so as the rocks and soil break down and emit radon, it moves through gas and it goes from areas of low pressure into higher pressure or up into warmer buildings from the colder ground. And this means that ground contact or lower level buildings and rooms can have radon gas ingress into the home or a building. And we've tried to characterize radon across the country. The federal government did do a survey of homes between 2009 and 2011, but this is a radon potential map. So this map was generated to determine where in Canada the risks of radon may be higher because the uranium concentrations were greater in the soil. So these are not measurements of actual building. This is a measurement of the potential for radon to be a problem, with the red levels being higher and the blue levels being lower. However, this does not mean that there is no risk in the blue levels, the blue areas, because every region in Canada has some level of radon in the soil because there's uranium present in rocks and soil throughout the country. So where the areas are red, this just means that the concentration of the potential is higher. Health Canada's study looked by health region, and this is just for homes. They measured homes across the country, and certain health regions stood out as having more homes over the 200 becquerel guideline. And this is the guideline set out by the federal government, a recommended guideline at which you would begin to fix or remediate is called your home if your levels are above 200 becquerels. So what happens if you find that you're living or working in a building where the levels are elevated? There are things that you can do. The first one, though, is to test. Radon is colorless and odorless. It is radiation. It's difficult to detect unless you actually have a specialized test. So the testing needs to be done in places where people spend more than 4 hours a day, which would include a home, a workplace, a school, or a daycare. And then remediation is possible if levels are elevated. We can also reduce exposure in new buildings by building codes that prevent radon from actually entering the building in the first place, and codes exist both for new homes and in commercial spaces and buildings as well. So a question I have for people in the audience are, do you know if your school has been tested? Yes or no? And have you tested your home? I'm going to move on now. So why would we bother testing for radon in schools? We know that children spend a considerable part of their lives in school and childcare settings. Approximately 25 to 30% of waking time in a child's life is spent either in a school or a childcare facility. But schools are also workplaces too, which is a part of the reason that we're here today. We know that teachers and support staff and engineers often spend considerable amounts of time in classrooms that are either below ground or at ground level contact. And Health Canada does recommend 200 becquerels per meters cubed, both for homes and for public buildings, which include schools. So the research question that we undertook at SFU was, what are the current policies in Canada for radon testing in schools? The federal government this year released a guideline for how to test for radon in public buildings, including schools and correctional facilities. So our question was, across the country, what provinces are testing for schools and how is that being done? And this is not the first time these questions have been asked. There has been some media attention that's been paid to the issue of testing of radon in schools, for example, in Ontario. However, what we found when we dug into some of this work was that school testing across the country is not at all consistent. So what this map shows is the gray circle, which is Quebec. Quebec is the only province that actually requires schools to be tested, and they began that initiative in 2010. Other provinces have tested all of their schools, including Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and the Yukon is in the middle of testing all of its schools. But some of the notable provinces that have not tested all of their schools include Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, and British Columbia. So the key findings again from the research project was that Quebec has mandatory school testing. 3 provinces and 1 territory have been testing schools since 2007, and that BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Manitoba have had low rates of testing since 2007. Some initiatives were begun in the 90s, particularly in British Columbia, but these were done under different guidelines and protocols. We did note, though, that some school districts and even schools by themselves dotted across the country had undertaken testing on their own initiatives. And we did focus this research on the public school system, but we do know that some independent and private schools had also undertaken radon testing initiatives of their own. What was really interesting about this research is we found that the reasons why schools had decided to test really varied across the country. And the Ministry of Labor in Saskatchewan was the agency that undertook testing radon first. They started testing all their schools in the 80s. In Quebec, they began in 2010, in part as a result of a Health Canada research project that was initiated in that province. In Nova Scotia, the Ministry and Department of Natural Resources has been very engaged in testing all sorts of buildings, including schools and workplaces. And in BC, the testing that was done in the 90s was initiated by WorkSafe BC and public health inspectors. Some provinces had Health Canada involvement when they began their testing, and this seemed to galvanize many of the programs that rolled out. So this is just some information on 2 of the provinces that have had the most comprehensive testing. So Saskatchewan, you can see down here, this is a report in 1986. So they've been monitoring radon for quite a long time in this province. And again, in Quebec, the project started in 2010. They initially found that only 16% of schools tested above the reference level, although we are still seeing information from that school testing program trickling out now. And remediation efforts are underway in many of the schools that they found to be elevated. So our research really showed us that radon testing programs in schools varied by province, and there was no standard way that the testing and the remediation, which is also important, had unfolded. And that follow-up or ongoing testing schedules was an interesting question, where people had tested schools, when was the next time they were going to test schools, and did they have protocols for what happened when a school was renovated or the ventilation patterns changed, which we know can influence the radon levels in schools. So testing for radon is important for students, in part because we want to reduce overall lifetime exposure, but it's also important for employees who tend to spend a lot of time in a classroom, and also we believe have the right to know and work in a safe environment. School testing, we think, is also a great platform to encourage the testing of homes. If school levels are elevated, the chances that a home or a residence within a region near the school is elevated is also high. I did a radon project at my local school, and I'd like to thank Division 4 for some of the drawings that they provided me with today. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, and we'll turn it over to Mike Whistler, Health and Safety Officer at BC Teachers Federation.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike. I just want to give some highlights of the background with BCTF working on the radon issue in the last few years. BCTF was first actually alerted to the radon issue through some of the membership in our schools. in the Kootenays going back to 2013. One of the members of the Health and Safety Advisory Committee alerted us that his school district in the Kootenays was being tested, and that started the discussion on that. Following that, we became familiar with the work of Carex through Carex's presentation at the BC Fed Health and Safety Standing Committee, where BCTF is a member. And that alerted us further to the work being done in the area of radon. In early 2014, representatives of Carex came and presented at the BCTF Health and Safety Advisory Committee, and this started this partnership of building and getting this information out. In this effort, the Health and Safety Advisory Committee recommended to the Executive Committee of the BCTF to lobby the provincial government for the mandatory testing of schools. In the summer conference in 2014, Carex representatives presented on radon at the BCTF summer conference discrete health and safety session. Our audience was starting to grow at this point, and then we're getting members involved from every local. BCTF started their lobbying efforts with writing a letter to the Ministers of Education and Health regarding the mandatory testing for radon in schools. After the initial rejection from the Ministry of Education, BCTF continued pushing for testing, which led to in-person meetings with ministry officials in Victoria, and that was attended by representatives from BCTF and from Carex. In February of 2016, officials from the BC Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils approached BCTF for direction in creating a resolution for the BC CPAC regarding mandatory testing. We forwarded them on to Carex for further information on this. In May of 2016, the BC CPAC passed a resolution supporting radon testing in schools and launched their lobbying efforts with the provincial government as well. In spring of 2016, a local of the BCTF spearheaded a campaign along with their school district to implement a testing and remediation program in their district. And Fred, coming up next, will be speaking about that. BCTF, at the summer conference this year, the 2016, officials now from Interior Health joined in the presentation of hidden hazards in the schools, and that also brought the discussion of radon further along. And leading up to where we are now, in the fall of 2016, representatives of Health Canada, the BC Lung Association, as well as BCTF and Carex all met together and we were discussing radon issues. Out of that discussions emerged this webinar, and as we continue to move forward with our lobbying efforts in that area. This collaboration group is going and is starting to yield some positive results. Awareness is growing, and testing and remediation are going forward cooperatively between schools, school districts, health and safety committees, and members of the BCTF. Although it's still not provincial policy, efforts are growing, and we have been expanding on a number of efforts. Mike?
At this time, I'd like to introduce Fred Knott, who is joining us from the Kootenay Columbia School District. I'll turn it over to Fred.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm going to speak today about my experience as a teacher testing all the schools in our school district, and also I just want to start off saying that that I am a parent. I have two small children, one of whom attends a daycare at a school in our school district. He's 3 years old, and my other son, this is his first year of kindergarten. So it's something that's important as a parent. It's very comforting to know that your school's been tested, and so that was an emotional kind of focus for me. My work with radon really started. I responded to something in the Interior Health newsletter, which is the health authority in our region, a man named Greg Bateland, who's involved with prevention for interior health, had posted that he had a grant from Health Canada to supply radon testers to schools, daycares, interested organizations. I contacted him. My hope was, you know, he might supply one tester for a school. We have about 13 schools in our district, so that was my hope when I called him, and he really came through. He asked me about the size of our district, the size of our schools. He ended up supplying almost 80 detectors so that we could have sort of a comprehensive initial testing program. He gave me sort of guidance around where to place the detectors, and the approach that I decided to take. I'm was the health and safety chair for our union, so I met with teachers and I asked them if they'd be willing to, you know, take on the responsibility for 3 months to have this thing in their classroom, to make sure it didn't get lost, to make sure that, you know, it didn't get thrown out or students didn't lose it, which, you know, if you think about a kindergarten class, that could be more challenging than you think. I think in general the reaction of teachers was positive. You know, our area is known to be high for radon, especially Castlegar, and we have a number of schools in Castlegar where people just didn't know. You know, so I think starting the process to get those questions answered was welcomed by teachers. And, you know, it's interesting, we didn't lose a single detector. When I returned after 3 months, teachers had taken that on, and we were able to get sort of a 100% return rate. It was a partnership and cooperative, or it was very cooperative in terms of the work between our local union and the school district, in that the school district supported me with some release time. I did personally visit every school and met with each teacher, and, you know, after we had the results, I was able to follow up and answer questions directly to teachers. So it was a good partnership, and it was something that would have been very challenging without having some release time from our school district. So I am appreciative of that. I think, you know, we had done our testing over the winter, which is sort of the best time to test, as Allison was alluding to. Once we had our results, it turned out that we had one school where about 50% of the school was over the 200 becquerels limit that Health Canada sent. So we needed to start looking at remediation in that school. We also had a smaller, kind of almost like a one-room schoolhouse alternate school that had an area that was high. And, you know, Allison had referenced the pressure differential of buildings as being a potential cause of elevated radon levels, and that ended up being the case at one of our schools. The school, upon investigation by a remediation company, was found to have negative pressure in the school, and so that negative pressure was actually pulling radon into the building from the soil. At our other school site, we had a couple of things going on, but one of them was that, you know, it was a house that was converted into a school. The house had a crawl space underneath that was not sealed. It was basically open, bare soil, so you can have radon coming up through that. Subsequently, that was sealed, and then in the other portion of the school, they actually did basically they core through the concrete, and they have a fan that vents any gas from below the slab of the building above the roof line of the building. So we're now through the testing stage. We're well into remediation. One of our sites is completed. The others is being remediated this year. So I think parents and teachers are really happy with what's happened and looked at that testing and remediation very positively. And I would like to echo Allison's comments about, a school is a great place to raise awareness about radon and to encourage people to test their homes. I think, it's one of those things that can be really powerful, and it's it's powerful when the school district and teachers can kind of work together and achieve some results in a relatively, for radon, achieving results in a term of about a year from testing to remediation, I think it is powerful. I think that's really the gist of what I wanted to convey for the webinar today. Just that our school district has been through this process. It's painless. It does take partnership and some investment, from teachers and from the school district. But ultimately, the thing that's most powerful at the end of it is really being aware of the conditions in your workplace and having that confidence for the students that are there too, that they're safe, and I'm sure parents share that as well. Thanks.
From the BC Law Association.
Thanks for having me. The British Columbia Law Association is one of the oldest nonprofit organizations whose mandate is to promote lung health among British Columbians. Our involvement in radon dates back in 2007, okay, where when Health Canada lowered their guideline from 800 becquerels to 200 becquerels, our efforts has been focused on awareness and educational campaigns and advocacy. And with that, we started doing a lot of public forums in radon-rich areas in the province, namely Castlegar, Clearwater, Barrier, Kamloops, Nelson, and the others, mostly located in Zone 1. And we started building partnerships, engaging health authorities, trade schools, government agencies, communities, other nonprofit organizations, and the industries. Sorry about that. Reinforcing Health Canada's message, every home should be tested for radon, we started distributing test kits. First of all, we started making it available in the province, since very little is known about radon, according to Health Canada's survey, and it has been proven. None of the home hardwares or Home Depots or Walmarts were selling those test kits, so we made it available through the BC Lung Association, then encourage all these stores to carry those products and make it more affordable or available for people who would like to test their homes. We also handed out free radon detectors in various communities just to encourage them to test. All test results are put together and were handed in to BC CDC to keep and to use for further research. We release a lot of PSAs, ads on TVs and newspapers and other social media, just to raise awareness and educate the public. We also did poster contests in schools, mostly in the interior and northern BC. And with funding from the Ministry of Health, we developed our Radon Aware program. We started testing more homes through distribution of more free test kits in the interior and northern BC. So we have collected more data, offered certification program for mitigators and measurement technician, knowing one of the gaps there was no certified mitigators in the province. So people are asking where to go, who to measure their homes, or how to mitigate their homes. So in order to make that available to homeowners, we provided a certification program now being run by Cancer Society, Canadian Cancer Society, and the BC Lung Association through its Radon Aware program. As of this time, we started with only one certified mitigator in the province. Now we have about 25 certified mitigators. Through advocacy and through lobbying and efforts, concerted efforts by various groups, we were able to amend the building code from in 2014, December 2014, which states that we, instead of a rough-in newly constructed homes, we will now have a passive system built in new homes. We conduct studies comparing the rough-in versus the passive versus active approach to mitigation. And through the funding, we also were able to mitigate 16 homes in Prince George and Castlegar, strengthened our partnerships with communities and and especially First Nations communities to test their homes and mitigate their homes. It seems that we have done a lot of work, not only the BC Lung Association through its Radon Aware program, Health Canada, Carex, BCTF, the building industry have gone a long way in addressing the issues, but there are more work to be done. We would like to encourage every homeowner to test their home. Not every home is safe. We wanted to make sure that every homeowner can live safely in their home. And the most important thing that we are trying to address right now is for people to take action. Those homes that were tested and showed high levels of radon have not mitigated. We want them to mitigate their homes as much as possible. But will that be brought through a guideline change where we would like to see a lower guideline than 200 becquerels? Can we do it 100 becquerels as of that same as that of WHO, World Health Organization, or should we be doing 150 becquerels that's similar to that of the United States? However, changing the guideline would entail a lot of work, but we hope that we can bring it down sooner. We also, just like Anne-Marie was talking about a while ago, testing and mitigating schools, daycares, group homes, and workplaces should be done. We are hoping to see that mandatory testing of all public places should be done in the future or in the near future, and also public testing or mandatory testing of all schools. We would like also to see in the future radon being included in school curriculum, especially in trade schools, architecture, engineering. We also would like to see some kind of incentives for homeowners to test and mitigate their homes, either in the form of a tax rebate or any other way that we could encourage them to take action. I think that's all.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll turn it over now to those of you who are viewing the webinar to ask any questions. Feel free to tell us which presenter you would like to have answer the question. And again, feel free to send any questions that you have. And we'll start with one just to the panel. Why is radon a priority topic right now?
Well, I'll start with that actually. It's become a priority with BCTF because part of our role is in the health and safety prevention way. And this program of testing and mitigating is an ultimate prevention activity. If we can prevent if we can detect and then mitigate the radiation prior to any consequence, then we're moving forward in that realm. Anne-Marie, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, I'd like to add to that too. We know that lung cancer is the leading cause of death within cancers. And anything that we can do to reduce the burden of lung cancer, it's still a fairly fatal disease. Almost just over 10% of people survive more than 5 years. So it is quite a fatal cancer. As smoking rates are lowering, we know there's other things that cause lung cancer, other environmental carcinogens, of which radon is a priority. So for us, this is the reason why we're interested in it at SFU and Carex, is because it is, again, the second leading cause of lung cancer after smoking.
As far as the BC Lung Association is concerned, I think the main focus of people when they talk about lung cancer is on tobacco. And we just wanted to reiterate that radon is the second leading cause of cancer, lung cancer, second to cigarette smoking. So we're trying to make the connection in that way and trying to make sure that people take action on what is seemingly unimportant topic for them or an unimportant issue, because simply when they talk about radon, they think about being natural in the environment. People say there's nothing much we can do, but in reality, there's a lot we can do to reduce our exposure, and that's reducing lung cancer as well. People also look at it as, because people doesn't see it, smell it, touch it, or even taste it, people doesn't even know that they are being exposed. So we are trying to make that people to be aware of that type of exposure.
Thank you very much. I have some questions here. Just a second. Question for Anne-Marie. Did your study of radon testing in schools nationwide look at quality assurance and how the schools were tested? Do you know if the schools followed the Canada guidelines for testing large buildings, i.e. were enough kits put into schools in appropriate places during the winter months?
That's a great question. And our study, we were not able to access that type of information. So what the research we ended up finding was whether or not school testing policies existed, essentially yes or no. And we were unable to access a lot of the information on how the tests were conducted or even the test results. So in some cases, we could find the proportion of schools over 200 becquerels. In a minority of cases, people actually shared the data. But for most of them where testing efforts had occurred, we don't have the actual data from those testing programs.
Great. Thank you very much. The next question. Are there school districts that have created a policy or protocol for testing radon in all schools? We'll turn that to Mike.
There are right now a couple of districts that have embarked on this, and they're actually undergoing mitigation right now. They've undertaken their own testing, or they've undertaken testing with our assistance, and have created policies and procedures around that. It's not provincial-wide, but it has begun.
Thank you. Next question. Can you please describe the risk communication process and response by the community and parents where the school was found to exceed the guidelines? So I think we'll ask that one to Mike and Fred, but let's start with Fred.
1 second.
Just 1 second, Fred.
There we go.
Go ahead, Fred.
So the question was around what was the community response when a school was found to have exceeded the guideline. I think that, we wanted to have a very measured response. If you look at the Health Canada guidelines, the 200 becquerel level has a remediation timeline of about 2 years, and that was where our school was. So it was important to stress to our teachers and to parents in the community that it's not an emergency type of a thing. It's something where we tested, we identified a problem, and we're going to look at remediation over a couple of years. And the 1 year timeline that we're kind of finding ourselves in for our two schools, it is within that 2-year time period. I think there is always apprehension and anxiety, but in communicating our message to the community and to parents and to our workers, both teachers and support staff, we want to communicate to people that it's about prevention, and again, it's something that takes an accumulation over a long period of time, and that school is only a percentage of your exposure to radon. So, while your school is being remediated, it's very important to also test your home. For children, they're going to be spending even more time at home than they are at school. So, just to echo that message, that can be kind of a jumping-off point to encourage people to test their homes as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Fred. We have another question. I'm a school district 64 teacher and health and safety district rep. Our committee is already interested in testing. How do we get started? We'll hand that over maybe to Mike.
A good start would be to bring that up with your site-based and your district-based committees that request such things. And then you can get a hold of the Lung Association, or they get a hold of their health authority. In 64, I think that would be Island Health. And they can direct the district in taking that on. Maybe Matt has some data.
Yeah, would you be, what they can do if the school wants is to contact either Health Canada, Carex if you are involved as well, and then the school, the health authorities of your area, and they will coordinate that where there are certain protocols to be followed, and then the test kits will be made available.
Can I add something? There's a list of certified remediators too, if school districts are wanting to hire professionals to undertake the work, that's available online with the Canadian National Radon Proficiency Program. So you can look on that website. We can provide that for people, and they can look and see who is certified to do the work. And there's also very clear Health Canada guidelines that can be followed too if people are wanting to do the work in-house as well.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question, I live in Radium Hot Springs. Doesn't sound good now. What should one look for local radon rates before testing each specific site? Turn that over to Anne-Marie.
Yes, we know that the interior of British Columbia does have higher levels. It's considered Zone 1, and the West Coast is considered Zone 2, and Zone 1 makes it a priority area for radon. So I would recommend testing if you live in the interior of the province, even sooner than testing here on the West Coast. So I think that's my answer to that question, as it might be time to test.
Thank you.
And they can get a hold of Interior Health to assist them with that as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Another question for Fred. How many schools did you distribute the 80 test kits in your district?
We have 13 schools, so we spread those detectors across those schools. And our district encompasses kind of a wide geographic area, all the way from Roslyn to Fruitvale, Trail, British Columbia, Castlegar. We have a small community school in Robson. So it was important to us to focus not only on Castlegar, which is known to have high levels of radon, but really to test all the schools in our district.
Great. Thank you very much, Fred. I have a question for Mike with the BCTF. And it asks, what are your next steps for advocacy? now that you've met with ministry officials, do you believe they will be moving forward with any policies or funding for school testing? And are you calling on the public or your membership for any actions to support your advocacy efforts?
Well, all the advocacy efforts are initiated through the executive committee, but it is a priority with the committee, and we'll continue to speak with the government, keep that on the agenda. And we'll continue to try growing the network for advocacy with that as well. And the BC CPAC is also becoming involved in that as well, and they're promoting that as well. So we should be keep that effort going forward.
Great, thank you, Mike. We have another question. Is radon an issue in other countries? And if yes, how are they dealing with that? Give that one to Anne-Marie.
It is an issue in many other countries. The country to the south, so in the United States, they also have a similar radon profile to Canada. If you look at the map, radon knows no geopolitical boundaries, so it goes from Canada into the United States as well. There are a number of states that require school testing and some that also require remediation. So there are protocols in a number of states along the border and in the East Coast that require school testing. And much of that available is also, information is available online too, and the different wording and protocols are available for them too if you're interested.
All right. We have another question. What does the BCTF feel it will take to get BC government to agree to mandatory testing of schools and daycares as it happens in many of the US states? The ministries of health and education have a duty of care to protect the health and safety of students and staff. What more can be done to engage these ministries? Maybe I'll turn that to Mike first.
The key thing with this is just to keep promoting it with the ministry and to keep acting and asking for it, and recognizing that that is their duty of care, and to keep the flow of information going and the most current information going to the ministry. And working with our partners, we'll continue to do that.
Can I add something on that? KPC Long Association through its Radon Aware program has been in touch with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, urging them to take some actions regarding into making mandatory testing at schools. We have been requesting that. And I think we can all work together in order to convince the government that we can do something about this, and we can all work together in order to make students and teachers, and to make everybody like be involved, like including parents, even like letter writing campaign or something like that, just to urge them to take some action in terms of radon exposures.
Do you have something to add as well?
I think that the federal government's also been a keen partner, and I know that they're interested here in British Columbia and being part of that, and as their involvement has sparked many of the school testing programs in other provinces, I think engaging the federal government, given their expertise, would be a useful strategy as well.
Excellent, great, thank you very much. Don't have any other questions at this time. Maybe it'd be good just to have a discussion from, again, maybe back to Fred, about how communication efforts with respect to the testing that he did in his local school district, how that was done through to the parents' associations and to his fellow teachers.
Well, the communication, once the testing was completed, the school district was very careful to, again, they wanted to present the information in a very, in a reasoned way, to kind of give all the information at once. We didn't want to cause a lot of anxiety for parents. And so we really returned to that initial partnership with Interior Health. I mean, initially, Greg Batelan at Interior Health was a resource for me around the prevention side. Once we had the the results, our district put out a joint letter with Interior Health kind of outlining what the results meant, timelines around remediation and what that would look like, and just sort of information and resources for parents, again stressing that the school is only a portion of where a child spends their day, and that the home is equally or more important in terms of radon exposure, and outlining some of the community resources, test kits, resources through the BC Lung Association, and but just really I think the communication from the district and from Interior Health to parents in the community, they took a little bit of time with it. They wanted to make sure that they communicated everything in a way that would be informative but wouldn't really cause anxiety, and would lay out clearly the steps that they plan to take to remediate the problem.
Excellent, thank you very much, Fred. We have another question from School District 52. What is the approximate cost to the district for test and remediation? Are there any grants for testing or remediation?
I can speak to the experience in our district. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Because we partnered with Greg Batesland at Interior Health, you know, we've referenced Health Canada. Health Canada had given him a grant, and so the cost to our district for the testing, for the test kits and the lab work was zero. It was really my time as a teacher to go and place those, and some of that was school time. The district gave me a couple of days, and some of it was my own time as a teacher after school, driving around and meeting with my colleagues. So I think in that sense, if you can partner with someone from a health authority like we did, the cost could be almost zero. I think realistically, you know, we had 70 detectors for kind of a smaller school district. If you look at those at a value of, you know, $25 to $50, I think it's a very worthwhile investment for a school district to make, and one that in the grand scheme of things, again, we're talking about the second leading cause of lung cancer. And it's important, and just letting your employees and parents know that you have a safe workplace, or one that, you know, is in need of remediation, but it's something that will be resolved in a year or whatever the timeline is. That kind of peace of mind is worth something as well, I think.
Thank you very much, Fred. I'm not sure if any of the panelists have anything to add on the costs of remediation and testing.
Not me.
Great, thank you. Well, I've run out of questions at this time. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything to add at this time.
I have some closing comments. That's
Sure.
okay.
That'd be great.
Okay. So when I looked at the poll and asked if people had heard the results of our poll earlier, so a number of you, 76% of you are familiar with radon, and that stands in stark contrast to the overall Canadian awareness. And I believe that awareness is still one of our key stumbling blocks, that if more people knew about radioactive gas in your workplace or in your home, you probably would be more likely to test or to deal with the issue. So I think awareness is still key. And the second poll, we saw that 88% of people didn't know if their schools had been tested as well. And so access to information is also key. If your school is testing, do you know if they're testing and what the results are? I think is also, these are good questions to ask. And that we're learning more about the radon and the science of radon as time goes on, but it is clearly a lung carcinogen. And being aware of that and making changes can help reduce the risk of developing lung cancer later in life. Len, did you have anything else to ask?
Well, the BC Lung Association will work with every sector, like the industry, the schools, in order to make sure that our students are safe, and we would like to see in the future that all schools will be mandated and medicated.
And actually, I do have one more question that has come in.
Okay.
So I will put it out, and it's directed to Anne Marie. Again, because of the quality assurance of the testing, because the study was able to access and therefore evaluate the quality of the testing nationwide, are you including a cautionary message in your reporting that, i.e., for example, that a province has tested 40% of the schools does not mean it only has 60% of the schools left of the test? The province needs to review the testing protocols and determine how much more testing needs to be needed?
Yeah, so the report is really to show where testing efforts are required. So Quebec being the only province that requires testing, and to point out that there are provinces who have been doing this for a long time, and if you are in one of those provinces, you might want to dig a bit deeper into the information that's obviously available about your school because it has been tested, and then to show the provinces that haven't tested that it can be done. And the fact that Saskatchewan has been testing all its schools since the 80s really points to the idea that this is definitely a possible thing that can happen. And there's lessons to be learned from province to province, and we should start sharing a lot of that information with the places where testing isn't required. And I think there's a lot of fruitful conversations that could be happening between health and safety committees across the country.
Great, thank you. That's right. Anyone else has anything else to add at this point?
I just wanted to mention that the Radon initiative with BCTF is just one of our prevention initiatives that we are undertaking. And we want to encourage any of these prevention initiatives with anything going on, discuss them with your health and safety committees in your schools, in your work sites, in your districts. And that's how things get better, is through that kind of dialogue with your health and safety committees.
Great, thank you very much, Mike. So at this time, I'd really like to thank our panel. I think we had a real fulsome discussion on the issue of radon in schools and the impact it has on students and teachers, and why parents really need to know about what the cause of what radon is and what impact it does have on the health of students and teachers. And again, I'd also like to thank Margaret Lee and Leslie Harrington, who've done an excellent job of organizing our webinar today. And I thank you very much. I'd like to remind you as well that this webinar will be available online, and so you'll be able to access and share it with others going forward. So thank you very much, and have a good day.